Thank you. All right, let's do this officially. 3, 2, 1. Welcome, everyone. You have found the Girls Club webinar called Close the Gap, Combating Pay Inequity. We're so happy to have you here. My name is Lauren Bailey. I'm the founder of Girls Club. I will be your host and moderator and sometimes contributor because try to stop me today. And I'm joined by three amazing women who are going to give some great insights along the way. I'm going to let them introduce themselves in just one moment. But before we do, we're going to say thank you to today's sponsors, Ambition and Factor 8. All right, take a look at what we're going to cover, and then we're going to introduce ourselves. It's a packed agenda. So we'll get to know our panelists and their lens first. Then we're going to talk a little bit about our strategy to close the pay gap. If you've been sent this webinar by someone who cares about you and respects you in your organization or even another organization, we want to let you know where to find the great stuff in here because there's content for all different angles on this webinar. We'll tell a few stories about good and bad experiences. And then we're going to talk, how do you check it? So this is for you, leaders, whether you're the leader of the company or the leader of the team. There are actions you can and should be taking right now. And Terry's going to tell us how to do that legally. We'll then cover some positive steps we can all take that don't cost a fortune. You might not be looking because you're not sure what you're able to do about it, but we're going to show you that there are things you can do. We're then going to unveil the Girls Club wage survey results because part about getting at equity is knowing where you should be, and that's not always easy. And finally, we're going to cover this point of view from someone who may find out there's inequality and how you go and ask for a correction. If there's still time at the end, A, I'll be shocked, but B, we'll take your questions. Here we go. Let's meet our panel. Kelly, will you start? Then Terry, then Mary.
Absolutely. Hello, everyone. My name is Kelly Berg. I'm based in Nashville, and I'm the Vice President of Customers for Ambition. Ambition is a sales coaching and gamification platform. So we work with a lot of revenue leaders and their teams to, promote accountability, encouragement, things like that. So I'll get to share the lens of someone who had some difficulties with this early in my career and how I learned and have taken things into my leadership career to make sure I don't make those mistakes.
I love that. Thank you. And I'm a huge, huge Ambition fan, not just for their super cool product, which is gamification plus coaching plus dashboards, like everything you really need as a sales leader. But I also am a huge fan of the people and the support. They've been with Girls Club from the beginning. So I thank them very much for that. Terry, you're up next.
Hi there. Hi, everyone. My name is Terry Stewart. I'm the managing partner of the Atlanta office of Fisher Phillips. I think we're up to 38 across the country now, but this is home and this is headquarters. And this is our founding office. So we are a labor and employment defense law firm. And I personally do litigation at this space, as well as advice, counseling, and compliance related to pay equities and all things that happen at work, which is a lot.
Which is a lot. Yes, you know more stories about this than any of us probably combined. And we're so grateful that you're going to give us some guidance here. Shall I just insert your disclaimer now that this is not considered legally binding advice? However, general, I don't know, how do you say that? Terry's got good advice. But
just general information. You must have gone to law school, Lauren. You're already providing disclaimers.
There you go. I've seen a contract or two in my time. All right, Mary Shea, drum roll, please. Hello.
Yeah, thank you, Lauren. Thank you, everyone. It's amazing to be here today. My name's Mary. I'm the co-CEO of MediaFly, and MediaFly is a revenue enablement company. So we help very large organizations enable their go-to-market teams with technology that is embedded AI and automation that helps everyone on the team engage more effectively and efficiently in their outbound activities.
Love that. I'll tell you what, Mary, MediaFly is everywhere these days. Like I can't stop seeing it. Has this happened just since you've joined?
Well, yeah, I mean, certainly I think you'll see many more exciting things in the marketplace over time. I've only been 6 months into the role, so I'm a little bit internally focused, but being a former evangelist at a tech unicorn and former Forrester analyst, certainly I have a large following and a platform, and we want to shout to the world what an amazing company and technology that we have. And yes, more to come.
Oh, I love that. Oh, very good. So she's just getting started, ladies and gentlemen. All right. So, Mary, we're going to go to some of that Forrester research next. But first, I just want to tell everybody you're in a safe place. Okay. If, like I said, if somebody's forwarded you this video and asked you to watch it and use some of these tips, I want you to know where we stand as a company. Girls Club's mission is helping get more women into revenue leadership roles. And where we stand on for the strategy for change, if you will, on the inequity is not to make people wrong and not to be haters, if you will. But our number one goal here is to raise awareness. And our job first is to do that by telling positive stories, then educating on what's possible. And our current goal that we're working on is getting companies to gap check. That's what we're asking for. I'm not asking for mountains to be moved. I'm asking for every leader who's watching this to please go and check, because you can't fix it if you don't know. Okay, that's step one. As a company, then our second goal is elevating women to leadership roles. If you were to just simply Google, why is there a wage gap? Part of what you'll hear is, well, there aren't as many women in leadership roles. And that's why we were founded 5 years ago. So we're here to fix that. But the third, and maybe the most important part of what we do, is teaching the women and underrepresented groups how to close that gap. We do that by building confidence. It's a huge part of our Girls Club curriculum, by helping show what is fair, transparency around wage, and you'll see that at the bottom of this webinar. And then, of course, teaching negotiation strategies. I've learned in the 5 years at Girls Club that on average, women negotiate 1 round or less, and men negotiate 3 rounds. So right there, folks, we're coming into the workforce at inequity, right? And we own that. So we're going to work on fixing that. Marishi, I'm going to pop it over to you. You've done research on women in revenue. Pardon me. I'm going to stop sharing and I'll pick that back up at the end. You've done research on this for a while. What can you tell us? What do we need to know?
Yeah. So first of all, thank you for everything you're doing. And this is a real area of intense passion for me. So when I was at Forrester, I pulled together about 12 of our top analysts, and we did a seminal report that looked at the state of women in B2B sales. And I think it was done around 2020. You'll see, if you're interested in getting the report, it's on the Journal of Selling from University of Northern Illinois. And it's super comprehensive. And, you know, what we found before I think you started to tease this out a bit, Lauren, because before you can kind of talk about gender pay equity, you've got to start to take a step back and say, well, you know, how many people who identify women actually are in B2B sales? So 5-6 years ago, when I did this research, 1/3 of B2B sellers were women. And then when you get up into leadership, it's about 20%. So even less. I just conducted research with Data, which is a research survey company, in July. And we found out that still today, we only have 1/3 of B2B sellers or B2B sellers that identify as women. So we all know COVID provided some flexibility, but also some setbacks for women in B2B sales. So I think the biggest thing that, you know, I like to use my platform on is to elevate, reach back, and coach and support women, all shapes and sizes, right? Not only on pay equity, but sort of like getting yourself out there and pushing for promotions. And I didn't know that men negotiate 3 cycles more than women, which is really interesting. And I just delivered an offer to someone who will just keep it out there. But I had to keep that in mind because I wasn't aware of that. It's a very interesting data point.
It's not a Forrester backed or university backed study, be clear. This is LBS and everybody in Girls Club. But yeah, I'm telling you, it's very, very consistent. I've even done a LinkedIn poll, and it's frustrating. Very frustrating. All right. So Terry, I want to come to you next, please. You get the legal complaints, right? Talk to us about the trends that are happening around this.
Well, the Equal Pay Act is the main federal law that's been out there forever and still in place. But what we're seeing on a trend perspective is that more and more states and even some municipalities are creating laws surrounding trying to create and eliminate, equal pay and eliminate barriers in the pay equity space. Things like disclosure rules, pay bans, prohibitions on asking for prior compensation history, these things are starting to really come out at a very fast pace. We'll see some things. Oh, there it is.
I just thought
we
I would back you up here.
Thank you. This is our pay equity map, and it's available on our website. And you can go to each state and see in real time what the laws are and what is developing. So this is kind of a trend that's happening across the country. The other thing, in addition to compliance with all these new various state laws, is that companies are wanting to do something about it. So they are seeing that there are major legal cases in the news, large class actions. It's dangerous to have inequality. But most of the time companies want to do the right thing and help close that pay gap, whether they can do it all at once and rip the Band-Aid, or whether they have to take it chunks at a time. Conducting a pay equity audit and then determining what to do with those audit results within your current business climate and making that change is another aspect of what's happening in this space.
Carrie, I'm hearing a lot more people talking about wage. Is that something is that how people are landing up in your office? Is this a trend that you can validate or not?
I think that's right. For one, there are general prohibitions against keeping certain compensation confidential for certain types of workers. So that's always been present, but more people are sharing it. To these laws, and it's complicated to comply with all of these. So that's how they end up here, and then doing the right thing, just wanting to close the gap. And then unfortunately on the last as a last straw, sometimes there is litigation that results either from EEOC charges or from class action claims, either in these state laws or on a federal basis, and then we're charged with defending that litigation and trying to see whether there is validity to it, or whether it's an accurate description or allegation against the company.
Got it. So things are on the rise, and maybe it's because of the laws that are out there that people are talking about it more, or maybe because there's great stories like the ones we're going to share here today of people doing something about it, that it's becoming safer to talk about. I'd like to just go backwards for 1 second before we go forwards, and we're going to take another look at this map. Thank you so much for showing us this. For folks who haven't seen this before, if I'm in a gray state, where I am in Arizona, that means that it is legal when I'm accepting a job for them to ask me what my compensation is at my current job. But if I'm in an orange state, if I'm going for a job and someone asks me, what did you make before? Then I am able to say, gee, that's not okay that you ask that. Is that how that works, Terry? Or do you have some advice around this?
I mean, yes, there's and some of these states have many pay equity laws, some of which are you're required to publish pay bands. You're not allowed to ask salary history questions. You have to have legitimate non-discriminatory reasons for any pay difference. So any of those states can have multiple laws, but yes, in the pay equity map, if you on the live version, you can scroll over it, hover over it, it'll show you the laws and then tell you specifically what those are. So if you're an advocate or looking to make a change, you can share that information. If you're a company wanting to know what you should do to comply, the law is always the floor. And then you can elect to do even more than that if you'd like.
I love that. And I took this from your website, but would you tell everybody the website who wants to follow along, please? And hit that
sure. It's very easy, fisherphillips.com. And then if you type in pay equity, we have an entire pay equity practice group with hundreds of attorneys across the country in the various locations that specialize in this. And we've published to the world a lot of free resources so people can help make change.
Love it. Thank you so much. Morgan, thank you for your question. I have the same one. So regardless of what color my state is, when someone asks me, well, what's your current compensation? Do I legally have to share what that is? Or can I say what I believe my worth is, or go about it with what I'm asking for instead of what I was being paid?
I mean, I don't think if there's a salary band, it's not a history band, it is an improper question. Whether that's the best mode for you actually getting the increase that you want, I like your suggested workaround, not you're not allowed to ask me that, but let me tell you what I'm worth.
Yeah. Yeah. Perfect.
That's just a good business strategy to always lead with the positive.
Very good. Yep. I love that. So Morgan, hopefully that's going to answer your question. Kelly, you've got a success story and a nightmare story, and I want to start with success stories.
Sure.
Right? You tell us a little bit about how you did a better job as you went for your more recent position.
Right. So I think I took a lot of the tough stories or situations that had happened early on in my career, and was much more prepared when it came time to negotiate. So understanding titles, understanding what goes into compensation packages, what is the norm for things like a base and OTE, understanding sort of the ins and outs of those pieces of equity if you're going to a startup company and what that actually means. I don't think anyone had coached me on this early in my career to say these are the parts of compensation that you need to think about. These are different ways you could advocate for yourself, or resources where you could go look, or people who you could talk to or ask, just people in leadership positions who could be mentors or who could give you that guidance. So I certainly think I've been able to get more savvy on this throughout my career to fully understand the things that are important to me and position, like we were just saying, of confidently going into the conversations with this would be my expectations in order to take on a role like this.
It's those little words that help us the most, right? And I've captured two so far. This would be my expectation, which is how you say what you're looking for, or here's what I'm worth.
Right.
Right. Or here's what I believe this position is worth, or my contribution to this position should be worth X. So love that. And I'm so sorry that we have to learn from the mistakes, right?
Yeah.
And that's what we're trying to change at Girls Club. We have so many assets, so many interviews about negotiating, tips on what's negotiable, how to ask for it. And we're going to share some of those today. So I want to tell another positive story. I'm lucky to call her friend. She's a Girls Club thought leader, Anna Barrett at Outreach. When she became CRO, one of her very first actions was to go in and say, all right, let's do a check, right? Wasn't a complaint. This was a proactive leader who said, let's check for a wage gap. And her advice to us is be very careful about how you check and what you ask for. So I'm going to read these notes, right? Anna says you want to be very specific to ask HR for salaries by, take notes here, folks, gender, role, geography, and level. And that's how you make sure that you're apples to apples. Mary, I see you nodding there. So I'm glad that you agree. That way you're not going to miss some of the nuance, right? So an example would be, I want to see my US West Coast SDR level 1, men versus women, right? East Coast AE level 2, men versus women. And that's where you find, whoa, we've got some outliers here. And at that stage, we ask ourselves, why? Why does person A make more than person B? And it's worth digging in because number one, you're going to find some differences. Oh, there's an education difference. Oh, there's an experience difference. In fact, Mary, I think you said that last time you checked, the women were making more than the men, right?
Well,
And you have to answer that question.
Yeah, I mean, there's some interesting, development. So it's great to see things indexing a little bit more. I want to emphasize a couple of things here. I think research is really key. I love research. So the more empowered you are with knowledge around what is an appropriate amount for your role and level, the better you can go into that discussion, feeling comfortable and relaxed. Because sometimes, it saying it's not legal for you to ask me that question, that could be a bit of a cooler on where things are going from the interview process. So doing your research and getting comfortable. The other thing I advise folks that I mentor is do some role plays before you have these conversations, right? Find another, another friend, another colleague, a manager, someone you've worked with before, and practice it, because the more you get comfortable and you can ease everyone else's comfort, I think it's great. And I just wanted to add something that is really exciting. I ran a search several months ago, and I had the finals were 2 men, 2 women, 2 people of color, and I was pleasantly surprised because I asked my HR, find out what their requirements are, because that's what we do. We don't ask what they had done in the past. We're based in Chicago. And it was interesting to see the women come in higher than their male counterparts for this role that I was looking at. And you don't always see that. So I took note, and I was really excited because I think that's positive progress.
Oh, that sure is. Yay. And yay, hats off to MediaFly for that practice. I want to recognize that. That's a big deal. All right. So the other reason you want to check those nuances, folks, is because if and when folks come to you, right, leaders, be ready. If you haven't been asked about pay gaps, you will be. Right. And when they come to you, you want to be ready with that nuance. Right. So when Kelly comes to me and says, why am I paid less than Terry? Then I can say, oh, well, the difference in this role is Terry's law degree. Right. And that's what makes the difference, or Terry's 10 years of experience. Now, that's not usually the case, however. We usually wind up with gaps because leaders who are rapidly building teams do what they need to do to get the talent at the time. Also, markets change, right? So we had to pay more for talent in different time periods. And folks who were brought on 10 years ago may not have caught up with annual increases to folks we have to bring in today. And that brings me to a question that Brittany put into our Q&A chat. Oh, sorry about that. I'm going to get to yours in a second, Brittany. This one was actually in chat. What happens when you've been with a company a long time, right? You've been there for 10 years, and guess what? You know the people coming in are making more. So that is exactly what we're talking about here. That's a pay gap. And leaders are aware that this happens. They're not trying to demotivate their loyal employees, right? They have to pay more to get this talent today. So if that's the case, then we're going to address your question in the back half of how do you go and ask? But it's not a gap that has an asterisk next to it. You have every right to go and ask for an adjustment based on that. Fair, everybody? Are we all agree there? All right, cool. I have one other really positive story to tell. This one's on a very small scale. This is how easy it can be. My friend Brian Campbell was working for a software company. He was the VP of sales. He had 5 directors. One of them was female. She was the top performing team. He took a look at everybody's salaries and found out she was paid more than 20% less than all of her male counterparts. She didn't know it, but he knew it. And he went to HR and said, fix this immediately. He didn't have to do extra budgeting, right? It was one person. He added a couple bucks to the revenue line item and said, guess what? We're going to make this up in sales. And I sure as hell am going to make it up with her loyalty. Called her into the office. She thought she was in trouble. She told this story in a girls' club meeting one time. And it was just people had tears in their eyes because I will work for him forever, she said. He handed her a check for 6 months back salary.
Wow.
He said, I wish I could have done it for more, but here's your last 6 months. And now you'll be equal for the rest of the time. So you don't have to wait to be asked, leaders. All right. Kelly, I'm coming back to you. It's time to hear the negative.
Are you ready for the exact opposite of the story we just heard?
Honey, I've heard them so many times. It just breaks my heart. Yep. Tell us.
Okay. Early on in my career, although I did have a few years of experience, I was working on an all-male team. I was the only woman, sales and biz dev, and doing well. Thought I was doing great, had great relationships with the team, and we were working on a project that was not so fun. It was a lot of late hours, and a male colleague who was trusted, a friend, great. He was just venting to me about, this is so ridiculous that we need to do this. We don't even get paid 6 figures. And I'm like, right, like nowhere near. And then he said, $95K to do this job is crazy. They should be paying us way more. Stop me in my tracks. What do you mean? Who's 95? What are we talking about here? I get paid 70K. And I'm telling you, we did the same job. We worked together all the time. We both were great at our jobs. But that is a huge gap. I didn't even know what to do. He was horrified because I told him, and he was immediately advocating for, you need to go talk to them. You need to get paid the same amount. That's crazy. So naively, I kind of thought there must be some sort of mistake here. Sure, I'm going to go talk to someone about this and see if we can match this. And the first thing I was told when I went to a senior leader of this team was, he really shouldn't have told you that. That wasn't fair for him to do. Of course, yes, I know that you think that this wasn't fair, but unfortunately, I know this information now. So, one of the reasons I was given is that during my interview process, I had shared that at my current role at the time, I was making 65K. So they said, we knew that 70K was a bump for you. So that was great. You were happy with that. You took the role for that. But that's basically lowballing, who's the cheapest candidate we might be able to get in here, or would she take it for this versus what other people are making? I don't think they were a company that had bans for roles or good practices regarding all of the things we're talking about now with levels and taking experience into account. And so ultimately, despite me then starting to become passionate about, I want to do the research, I want to make a proposal, and I want to be paid fairly, I didn't get it. And as Lauren likes to say, I then voted with my employment and went and found a new role, left the company, even though I thought I was doing great. I was hitting goals, I was doing well, but I chose to leave and took a large pay increase to go to my next company, because I also then knew that I didn't need to be giving all of this information or sharing exactly what my entire salary was. I knew how to advocate for, this is what I should make in this role. So it was
And
very painful, but
oh, it
ultimately good.
is. I'm so sorry it happened. And you know what? Had you gotten the advice, if you'd seen this webinar ages ago and grabbed a buddy like Mary and done some role play, right? Then
Definitely.
you'd have been ready,
Yep.
because it is a game and it's a dance.
Yeah.
And I've got a message now for my HR leaders. Ladies and gentlemen, I understand that you are tasked with saving the company as much money as possible. But Terry, I don't know if you have any wisdom to drop in on this, but your company winding up in a lawsuit is going to be more expensive than the differential in the 10K to make equity happen. The lowball offer is actually your enemy. At one point in time, you might have gotten an attaboy and an attagirl for that, but those days are over. And it's time that HR step up and help us in this, okay? HR needs to ask about requirements, not see how low they can get. And that's a different directive than you may have gotten in the past, but these are different times. Terry, do you have any feedback on HR's role in this and what you see when people wind up in litigation?
Sure. So, a few horror stories, if we're on that topic. We have the U.S. Women's soccer team. We have the EEOC being very interested in this and being able to file class actions without having to meet the class action requirements. Just because of who they are, they can do it. And litigating against the government is difficult because they do have unlimited funds, all our tax dollars. So they have the power of the government behind them. So litigating against them is very difficult. Two, you have companies that are, it's publicity. It's a negative thing in the marketplace to be one of those companies that has that. And plenty of people have, Google and otherwise. I mean, there are so many people that have had it, and the damages can be everything from minor to a few dollars an hour to millions and millions of dollars in damages, as well as the attorney's fees that go along with it. So as far as what the company can do from a pay equity standpoint, there's like really 5 things I would say. One, you start by examining how your compensation process works to begin with. Is it based on objective, subjective criteria? What documents do we have to account for it? Is it based on performance appraisals? Is our pay treatment just based on your performance review, or is it really lockstep? And that can lock in things over the years if you start from the wrong number. So knowing how your
lockstep. I'm sorry.
meaning, you get 3% every year, but to Kelly's example, that will never catch up. So, understanding really well how your compensation works, knowing what your legal requirements are. And then my favorite part of this is conducting a pay equity audit. You've talked about some of the research that all of you have done, and it's really doing the same thing within your company. You can take that on as small a piece or as large a piece as you want. So say you don't, it's difficult revenue times for the company. It's maybe we don't take every single job in every single category, but we say, where can I make the biggest impact?
Yeah.
And start there. And kind of conduct it in that way.
Well, let's pause here for just a second. I like that you're saying that one very positive step every leader needs to take is go examine my practices. And those are practices at hiring, and those are practices at raise time, right?
Mm-hmm.
So have I trained managers on what I'm looking for in hiring and what I am and I'm not allowed to ask, right? Are there bans in place? Who approves the final number? And who's checking? There's another very small action that you can take before you make that offer, right? Mary, you just went through this. Before I make that offer, let's just go and check all the other blank positions in the company and see where I'm at, because this is where I need to be. I think I can afford it. But do we always then take that other step of, and is it within equity? So I think that's another big tip that's come out of this. Thank you very much for that. I just want to say right now, in case we're going to lose people at the half, it's really important, ladies and my few gentlemen who are on this, that you forward this video recording to your HR leader, to your company leader, to your department leader. Do it with love and respect, because you know that they are fantastic individuals who want to do the right thing. And here's some advice to help them do that. Okay. If it's only us who have a problem that are watching this, we're not educating the people who can actually change it. So thank you for that public service announcement. Pause. All right. Terry, you also said that you need to go in and check, right? Do an audit. But what if I'm afraid to do that? Do I need to hire a lawyer? Do I give it to HR? If I want to do good, how do I start?
Well, our suggestion for all of this is to do it with counsel and to do it under the guise of attorney-client privilege. If you conduct these studies on your own, ad hoc, without knowing what you should really be looking for, or if all of this data is existing in a certain place, it's discoverable. It's ripe for discovery in a lawsuit, if it's a public entity, to be disclosed in FOIA requests. But what you can do is do it under the privilege, and in consult with counsel, you can do it in the right way to make the most change. We are experienced in this space, and also it does not, it keeps the entire process protected, so it doesn't open the company up for liability while still helping to make the change. So you get the best of both worlds. You're making the change, but you're not subjecting the company to any greater risk or liability. So it's really the best of both.
So I've got to do a follow-up question because I don't get it.
Sure.
If I want to go and check, just how it is. If I want to go and check, right, and I don't do it under it, right, if I haven't hired Fisher Phillips to help me do that, then I'm more liable. Everything I'm doing is discoverable. But if
It's discoverable, not necessarily more liable. It's because the same thing exists, whether or not,
right,
the data is what the data is.
Right. But how does privilege help me then?
But the privilege protects your analysis, so you can do it in the right way. One, you're pulling the data in the right way.
Yeah.
What are you going to find? It might be quite terrible what you find. And do you want all of what you found to be discoverable? No, you want to say, oh my gosh, I have a problem. How do I fix it without serving it up in a particularly public forum and subjecting yourself to risk? And there's ways to actually implement the change and say, instead of, hey, I've been paying all 15,000 of you improperly and underway, I'm here to fix it. There are ways to go ahead and do that through cost of living adjustments or any various ways to actually make the change with not waving the flag and say, let's all sue the company for it.
Yeah, exactly. Okay, got it. That makes more sense. So I have another horror story I have to share, and I'm interested in everybody's feedback on this. So this came to me again through Girls Club. There was one of our amazing proteges and managers whose leader, a male, and told me this story. She came to him because she found out, like we all will, folks. Guess what? I mean, she had the Kelly Berg story, straight up, right? Same job, man, woman, huge difference. Took it to her boss, male. Boss took it to the CEO, to the head of revenue, his boss, and to HR. The CEO said, let's fix this. The head of revenue said, don't you dare call those the same job. Go meet with HR immediately. Your job is in danger. HR said, those aren't the same job. Why would you ever say that's the same job? Destroy that copy of the job description while I put out a new one. So they went into ask coverage mode, right? Instead of let me help fix it mode, which is really sad, right? And so the leader, this man, went back to the CEO and was doing everything he could to advocate. And at that point, the woman was out. She voted with her employment. You lost somebody fantastic and very well trained, if I do say so myself. And by the way, this guy, not happy. He can't believe his company reacted that way and treated his employee that way, right? And then felt really at risk himself through this process for trying to do the right thing. So there's a lot of leaders who are getting bad advice, right? And unfortunately, I think we have a long history of HR lowballing and CYA instead of trying to do the right thing. And that's unfortunate. I don't know how to fix that. Does anybody have any input on that, on how we get our HR partners working with us? Mary, you probably have the most experience at different companies and that sort of thing. Do you have any
I like
advice?
to look at the good of the world, and I think 90% of the people do want to do the right thing, but it's definitely surrounds of it's definitely a product of company culture.
Yeah.
So if you are a leader and you see behavior that is not acceptable to you in any level, including that, I believe the CEO is in charge. So,
And that's where we go.
in that example, and you are ultimately responsible for the company that you create and those that are below you, and so you do have the power to affect change if you want to do so. So basically, creating a culture where all of this is acceptable and everyone's moving and supporting everyone else in complying with the law and doing the right thing.
Good. I appreciate that.
I was going to essentially say very similar thoughts, which is mostly I think people do want to do the right thing. And the tone gets set at the top, right? So if the CEO is very clear and communicative around equity, hiring practices, again, it's not just pay equity. It's like, people want to work with companies that represent the world around them, right? Not represent a microcosm of how certain people may see the world. So I think it's really about setting the tone at the top. I also think we haven't really talked about the board, but if you're thinking about joining a new company or something, the first thing I do is go look at the board, and I get an immediate sense of like, what is the commitment to diversity, equity, inclusion? What is the commitment? If the board doesn't look like the world, then that's my first red flag, right? And so that would, number one, is that a company I want to work at? And number two, I better be really pushing pay equity here for myself, because maybe there isn't other people looking out for it for me.
Really good point, right? How can I role model along the way? Speaking of role models, Celia had a great point in the chat saying what's really disappointing is that so many HR leaders are women, and you're right on. And in fact, in this last horror story I told, the revenue leader was also a woman. So, culture is set at the top, but I think that we're coming out of the dark as I don't know, a gender, a country, but the past culture has been get people as cheap as you can and cover your ass. And folks, we're on notice, right? We're in the middle of a change. So let's talk about a few other things that we can do if we find inequity that don't have to break the bank and cost massive lawsuits, et cetera. So Terry, you already referenced one or two little ones. Who else wants to jump in here? Mary, I think you have a couple that you were going to make on what else we can do as leaders that doesn't necessarily take a massive budget.
Yeah. So what we do is, we have a wonderful investor. We just got a wonderful round of investment, and that's investor is a real strategic partner with us. So one of the first things we are doing is looking at our compensation. We've made some adjustments already, and we're doing a deep dive study on pay bands and looking at companies that are equally situated on the same growth trajectory and the same types of industry. And we want to get advice from them and work with them. And we also work very closely with outside counsel as well, to Terry's earlier point. So I think it's important to, it's not a one and done effort. It's a kind of thing that you need to look at, consistently and iteratively. Like right now, it's a little bit of a different environment than it was in 2021 when I negotiated 3 times my current pay to go into to another job. Probably wouldn't be able to do that today. So we're constantly looking at where we fit, and we want to do the right thing. I believe, and the reason I'm CEO of this company, co-CEO of this company, is that we want to win by, empathetic accountability, transparency, a team that does represent the world around us and doing things the right way. And that's not always the case. I've certainly worked in other situations where that hasn't been the case. So I would say you keep looking at it. It's not one and done. You look for your experts to partner with, and certainly I value tremendously outside counsel. And I'll mention this on both sides of the table.
Very good point. Yeah, very good point. Kelly, you were talking about knowing what's out there for the employee, but also for the company, right? That there's bands, and if you don't have official bands, there's kind of mins and maxes. What can you add to that?
Yeah, it's been interesting as someone now at sort of a growing startup. And my previous employer was much larger and had a very proactive HR team when it came to this. So I was able to take a lot of the things I learned there into my leadership role at my current company to say, as we're growing and scaling, in addition to wanting to make sure there's pay equity, what are the things that we could have just as part of our process of understanding levels within roles, defining some of those things. If we're going to say, this person should make more because they're more experienced. Well, what are the experience levels actually defined for each of these? If you're a senior person in a role or whatever that might look like. So actually kind of defining the competencies, the experience, what does a level actually mean? Does geography matter if you're a remote first company? I think there was a question in the chat about that too, which is interesting. So kind of laying the foundation and groundwork so that when you are going out and hiring or even evaluating your current team, you actually have something to refer back to that's not gut feeling or, tell me what you're looking for in your next role. You have bands, you have minimums, maximums, the midpoint, all of that. It's very helpful, and it helps continue to build alignment with HR and other leadership if you as a department leader have that all ready to go for everybody.
So the action here, folks, is if you lead a department, you can absolutely and should define some bands, some mids and maxes.
Yep.
Mins, I did say that right. Huh, where are the odds of that? In these roles. Okay.
Yep.
So, and partner with HR to do it. I think that's fantastic advice. I appreciate that. I want to pause and talk geography for a second. The question in the chat was, why do I have to be paid less if I live in a different geography? And I think the truth of the matter is those maxes come in different geographies where it's more expensive to live, which is unfortunate, right? But if you live in California or New York City, those are higher standards of living and more expensive standards of living and a more expensive employee. And I'll tell you straight up, I hire remote and I try to avoid those places because I can't afford it. So Terry, do you have anything to add on that?
Yeah, because some states actually and locales have various different minimum wages. You have the federal minimum wage, but it can look very different from state to state. So just on the very lowest level, you could have anything from a 50 cent to a $10 pay differential based on the law being the floor that companies have to comply with. So you're starting there. And then there can be other state laws for minimum salary tests for certain positions, et cetera. So that's one. And then you're exactly right about some locations just cost more in order for employees to live and work in a space. They couldn't they wouldn't have any employees if they couldn't meet certain minimum payment thresholds because of just the location itself.
Yep. Yeah, one that's true throughout the country as well. I have a few other tips I've researched that I want to share for leaders. If you found a gap, things that you can do that don't have to, like if you, right, you don't necessarily always have the budget. So step one is when you find the gap and you've done the comparisons, right, where you cannot explain it based on experience or education or whatever that case may be, you go and sit down with finance and with HR. And say, listen, I understand that I'll be given this bucket that is equal to a 4% or whatever it is. And I'd like to negotiate for more. So how can we get this, right? How much extra can I get? So go fight for the dollars, okay? Get whatever you can. And at that point, the advice is do what you can, right? You may have a few real standout cases. You may have a real standout department or two, but you may have to make some strategic decisions about where you fix and how much you fix. Another great piece of advice, this one is from Anna, is repurpose other budgets. So if you've got a couple folks that are way upside down, right, then maybe you're going to live without some of your T&E budget. Maybe you're going to cut one of your 17.5 tools. Maybe you're going to, use some of your hiring and recruiting budget, because certainly if you're keeping your great people, then you're not going to need that as well. So get as far as you can, and maybe you have to go make up the rest next year. That may be the case. The other piece of advice is ask yourself, am I just paying the squeaky wheel? We mentioned that men speak up more than women. Another informal poll I've done is how often as leaders are you getting requests for raises off cycle? We had a wonderful interview with a woman a year ago at Girls Coach. Said, I had a team of 5 men and 5 women, all at a director level. And none of the women asked for a raise even at annual review time. And every single one of the men asked for a raise off cycle, in addition to annual review time. So squeaky wheels are getting paid. The women are not going to ask. Leaders, I'm just going to put it out there. I hope this isn't true in a couple of years, but they're not going to ask. So you know what you do? You pay them anyway. And I have wonderful stories of that happening. Leaders saying, yep, none of the women asked for a raise, but they were sure happy when they gave it to them. And that's how you build the loyalty. So unless anybody else has a tip on what leaders can do, I'm going to share some of our wage survey results and then how to go and ask for equal compensation. Okay, here we go. We began this wage survey last year. I'm just going to start by sharing some of the demographics. Mostly women took this. Big surprise. We had a lot of trouble getting men to take this survey for us. We're mostly in the US. And of course, we're really heavily focused in revenue roles. Here we go. Men versus women. Female reps at that IC, individual contributor level, we're making more than the men. I loved seeing that. The story changes as we get into leadership. Male sales managers were around 100. Women were 105. Pardon me for that. Men were still less than women at the manager level. It's when we go up into the higher levels that we started to go backwards, right? 15% less at director, 19% less at VP. Diversity makes it even worse, right? Our LGBTQIA community is at about 25 to 30% less. And that breaks my heart, right? Our Black women are about 37 to 40%. Yeah, Latina women as well. It's just been, and we'll see this, you see this outside of our survey as well. Here were the top industries and the bottom industries. So if you're sitting in one of these bottom areas thinking this stinks, target somebody on the left. All right. Experience does play a difference as well. I found this interesting. If you're in sales, you're maxing out in your 5 to 10 years, right? But not when you're staying there longer. BDR, SDR, really the same. It's a shorter cycle, right? That's usually an entry-level job. And if you're still there after 5 years, you're not making as much. By manager, BDR manager and AE managers. Notice the difference in the first line. So BDR managers were started at 3 to 5 years. We just didn't have enough people taking the survey at the lower levels. And AE managers 1 to 3 years, 5 to 10 years. So AE managers making more in that 5 to 10 year space, which makes sense. It's usually a higher level job. This one I love. All right, mostly women answering this. When are you negotiating? Well, when I'm accepting a new job, a little bit more than half did negotiate their salary. We didn't get how many rounds in this survey. Or when I'm asking for a promotion. I'm asking for a promotion, but less than half of us are asking for a raise that goes with it. I can probably tell you 20 stories of women who are doing 2 jobs right now and getting paid for 1 job. I had that story. I was the only female director in my company. There was about 25 directors. I ran the enablement department and a revenue department. I was a sales director and a training director. And as I left, my friend, my work husband, as I used to call Mike, told me that, yep, lowest paid director in the company. At review time, a little bit less than half are asking for a raise. 1/3 of the respondents, pardon me, are saying when I think it's due or when it's necessary. And a decent percentage of us, 14%, never done it. 0% of us comfortable in any situation. That breaks my heart a little bit. So in the last year, have you asked for a raise or a promotion? Yes, and I got it. 1/3. No, and I didn't get it. About 1/3. No, and I got one anyway. 25%. I asked for it and didn't get it. 10%. The takeaway here is you'll get it 3 times as often if you ask for it. Same thing with professional development. I asked for it and I got it, 50%. I did not ask for it and I didn't get anything. I asked for it and I got it, 17%. I asked for it and I didn't get it, 16%. So almost the same story. You'll get it about 3 times as often if you ask for it. If you are wondering how to approach this, this is a model that we teach in Girls Club. This is actually a model I've stolen from the psychology community. It's called nonviolent communication, which is a weird name for this, but it works wonders. You can use this any place. Step 1, you introduce the subject, and this can be the hardest part. So it's okay to ask about it in advance. In our next meeting, I'd like to address my role in compensation, right? Or in today's, like, let your boss know it's coming. You don't want to surprise somebody, right? Then an observation. The hardest part of this entire thing, folks, is step 2. The observation cannot be filled with feelings. It cannot be filled with gotchas or angry or resentment or bitter or any of the things that are here in your heart because you feel screwed. Can't do it. You have to say what the facts are. I've become aware of this factually. Okay. My base in OTE is about 30% under market and about 20% under my peers. Then we respectfully share our feelings about this. I'm feeling undervalued for my contributions, seeing as I've regularly been a top performer. Okay. This is where most women in their first round of practicing this, which we do, go off the deep end because we're pissed. Okay. I get it. Cut it out. Practice, be professional. Then we talk about what we value. Working for a company that values me as well as equity is very important to me. And by the way, there are companies out there that do. Let me just tell you about MediaFly and Ambition and Outreach and all of these. No, can't do that. But they're out there, folks. I just wanted a name drop. Then you go for your ask. Would you please help me advocate for a change by getting the compensation data from HR and meeting with finance on my behalf for an adjustment? Okay. Your boss may not know there's a gap, and your boss, if they do, may not know what to do about it. Fair? All right. Feedback on this, whether it's the survey results or the asks experts. Kelly, what do you think?
I think the ask is the most important part, because if you go in and just say, hey, I learned this, okay, you need to ask specifically for, in that example, 2 things. Go validate this with HR, make sure I'm right. I just learned this, you know you're right. And then I'm also asking you to go meet with finance and work on that adjustment, like giving the person the tools and the steps of this is what you need to do about it is so important. I think so many people do the first 4 parts of it and then wait for the response. And you need to actually make the ask of what will go get the ball rolling to fix it.
Good, good. Mary, what's your feedback? I see you come off mute.
Yeah, I love the last slide that you shared, just the way you framed up, to storyboard the conversation. You've emotionalized it a little bit at the top, and then you bring in your feelings, because we all have feelings. Like we're not bots, right? We're all humans, and it feels better to work at a company that you're valued at. So I love the language. I think that you're right that we can get very upset, angry, emotional, and this is not the time for that type of tone and that kind of language. It needs to be, well researched, well thought out of, giving your boss kind of a heads up so they're not blindsided, and then, dig in the most professional, kind, and persistent way you can. So I love that. I love the last slide. I think that's fantastic.
Good. All right. Steal it and give it to every woman you know.
Yeah.
What is
Well,
your advice?
Okay. Well, it's just funny. I think that all of that is so true, because one of the main pieces of advice that I give to my younger female attorneys is never make a decision when you are at a low point. If you just found out that you make 20% less, that is not the moment to go and ask your boss about it. That is the moment to go home, hug your kids, pet your dog, have a good night, come
By that,
back.
you mean a bottle of wine and a girlfriend, right? Because
yes,
that's
I was
exactly
actually
where I'm
thinking
going.
that.
Yeah.
And then come back in a stronger, good place, fueled by the things that you love and the people that you love, to have a professional, thorough, strategic conversation about your career, because it's too important to throw away on a bad approach. You're in it for yourself, you're your best advocate, and that's not when you're your best advocate. So anytime you have that moment, or even if it's deciding, you know what, I'm leaving because I just made 20% more, that's also not the time to make a decision like that on your career as a whole. It's a time to go home to think about it, and then to decide what's the right thing to do.
Thank you for that. I appreciate that so much. Any other final words? Because if not, I'm going to give them to our sponsors with my thanks. Starting first with ambition. I love this summit. Even if you're not in Nashville, what a great excuse to go to Nashville. October 24th. It's always packed full with really great content. Kelly, I know that you'll be speaking and hosting as well.
I get to be the MC this year, so I'll be introducing Lauren. I can't
Oh,
wait.
that's so good. Yes,
Yeah.
I get to do the keynote this year, and I'm developing something new about coaching. And it's not great yet. I got to tell you, I got to work on that. I'm getting on the plane.
We have a month. We'll be fine.
It's going to be great. Oh my God, I love this summit. It is so much fun. And there's always way fun afterwards as well. So get there. Great sales leaders, great thought leaders, good stuff. Factor 8, I know their CEO really well, and they always support Girls Club, and all of the training that we provide in Girls Club, it's available in the sales bar, right? We're using Factor 8 skills training, and it's now available for as little as $77 per course. This is manager development and rep development, and it is world-class, award-winning stuff. If you've been hearing about Girls Club for a long time, but could not get into a cohort that we do annually, it is also now available on demand. That is a great big announcement. info.wearegirlsclub.com. Go get this advice. Watch the videos. Get the tips on negotiating salary. Hear from thought leaders. Get the training. It's good stuff. And I want to be finally thanking Fisher Phillips. Here's how you can find a Fisher Phillips near you. Not everybody gets access to Terry Stewart, but you've trained a wonderful team underneath you. And these folks can advise you every step of the way to getting to pay equity. Thank you all so, so much. Here's where you can find everybody again. Take a look at their company, find them, and link with them on LinkedIn. And I will end with mine as well. And a huge thank you Kelly, Mary, and Terry, this asset will live on. And everybody who's with me, please promise you're going to forward it to 3 or 4 leaders. It's a very important message. We can all combat pay inequity. Thanks, ladies.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks.
Have a great afternoon.
Thank you.
Bye, everyone.